Let us start today's class. Let us hope some of you will join. So far, we have discussed different aspects of fluidized bed boiler. But let us go through now what is its advantage and disadvantages, etc. Things are like this. Advantages of fluidized bed boiler is, say, fluid flexibility. It is the most effective feature of CFB boilers. Now, boiler particles constitute less than 1 to 3% by weight of all bed solids. Fuel particles constitute less than 1 to 3% by weight of all bed solids in the furnace of typical CFB boilers. Means, what is the main advantage? The fuel particles generally comparatively less than the other base solids in the furnace of CFB boilers. Say around 1%, 2%, 3%, not big difference, but well, to a certain extent less. But the rest of the solid which is available in the furnace itself and but totally non-combustible is solvent. Solvents or means limestone or dolomite, limestone or dolomite itself, and fuel ash. So what is the most important thing is what is contained in the furnace other than the fuel, because this will have all detrimental effect over the furnace burning, burning of the fuel itself. Say what we have only, because here we are injecting the fuel and air through limestone. So limestone or solvents are very much effective, present there, and fuel ash itself. Just 1 second, please. Generator. So what we have here, mostly ash and solvent to a certain amount. The special hydrodynamic condition of CFB boilers is allows excellent gas solid and solid gas solid solid mixing. In this boiler, this special hydrodynamic condition of this boiler is it can allow an excellent gas solid and solid solid mixing itself. These fuel particles linked to the furnace are quickly disposed into large mass of bed solid. Thus, the fuel particles excellent which fed to the furnace are first of all quickly dispensed into the large mass of the bed solids, which repeatedly heat the fuel particle above their ignition temperature and without any significant drop in the temperature of bed solid itself. So you see, what you are injecting inside the fuel is, what you are injecting inside the furnace is, that is the fuel itself. When you are injected or disposed into the large mass of the bed solids, which contains acid, which contains solvents, etc., which rapidly heat the fuel within moments and burns the fuel to create the flame itself. Now, above the ignition temperature, hit the fuel above the ignition temperature and without any significant drop in the temperature drop. But this happens when this burning happens, you know, the fuel itself which comes inside is comparatively less in temperature, normal room temperature or normal temperature they are surrounding. So to a certain extent additional heat is required, even say in terms of heated air, whatsoever it may be. So it's a time to end that, but this time is important because the heat generation will be affected if the fuel bed is not properly heated quickly. Now, what happens here? What takes within moments, it takes what happens here is a huge mass of lead solids and which is already terribly heated and already so number of a big amount of fuel is burning inside which has high temperature. As soon as the fuel comes inside the furnace itself, at once is rapidly heated and got the initial temperature. I got the initial temperature rapidly starts burning itself. And this is done without any significant drop in the temperature of the bed itself, solid itself. These features of CFB boilers allows to burn any fuel without the support of auxiliary fuels. So the auxiliary fuels like your solvents, like your well unburnt ashes, unburnt fuel ashes, without this support, the CFB boilers in the furnace has considerable amount of high temperature still present in the furnace itself, so that it can immediately ignite the fuel amount of fuel which comes inside the furnace itself. It can thus vary a wide variety of fuels very effectively in the same boiler. So, so many what is required, what is initially expected for the furnace by the furnace itself, it should have a coal or certain ignition of fuel which is rapidly which can be burned except within a moment. We can rapidly ignite it and burn within a moment. So this particular feature of high amount of residuals inside of solvent, inside of ashes inside the huge furnace which creates extremely high temperature for new burning or new injection of the new fuel. This injects the supports of this gives us the support of using a lot of different type of fuel, not that extremely high quality fuel or so. Thus, uh, it thus burns a wide range of fuels. This type of boilers, CFB boilers, burns a wide range of fuels, very efficient in the same barrel with either simultaneously or separately. And high ash contents, high ash bituminous coal, anthracite coal, partially rejects, peats, wood chips, petroleum coke, oil shed, all oil shed have been fired on CFB burners. So not only that, not only the ash with less amount of really less amount of ash, etc. We can use here high ash bituminous coal. After burning, it gives considerable amount of ash. Means it requires much higher amount because because it creates high ash means it does not have sufficient quantity left for the burning in the fuel furnace itself. So if there is a very huge high concentration of ash inside the furnace for using a fuel, which means the total mass, a significant mass of this particular fuel left, it doesn't burn and kept inside the furnace itself. And but it in the ash, which is in ash form, where particles or even liquid ash form, to keep considerable amount of ash content here. But that type of fuel is generally present in India, which is comparatively cheap. We don't have to import coal or coal from the outside, especially from America or Germany itself. Now, this can thus burn the anthracite coal, which is generally we like to use here. Coal washing rejects, it are in the rejects of the coal washer plant. This will also gets a certain amount of fuel, mainly mostly in a powder form, which is rejected, which is can be usable here for burning the fluid itself. Some peat, some wooden chips, some petroleum coke, oil shale. This has been can be fired in CFB boiler itself. So there is a lot of wide varieties of different type of fuel which can be burned in CFB boiler itself. Next comes, next benefits comes the high commercial efficiency. What we have in the what we have here is a superior mixing of in the CFB large reaction of space combustion stone extending to the top of the furnace above 40 meter and above a large utility boiler system. Superior mixing in the CFB boiler is a large reaction space conversion zone extending to the top of the furnace itself about 40 meters. Last reaction state means the combustion state, means where the volume of the furnace where it can make combustion takes place, which is an important area because it is depends on the capacity of the furnace itself. Capacity is high, the combustion will be quite okay also. And thus, a large quantity boilers, it is also have extend up to top up to the top 40-meter above the furnace. So furnace is very big here, and now large utility boilers and further also beyond the hot cycle and consequently long residence line of combustion affect high efficiency combustion, which can be high as 99% and wide varieties of fuel under different operating conditions. So what we have, first of all, we have a huge space in the furnace, which is about 40 meters above the bed, uh, and further beyond this bed, the hot cyclone and resistance line, consequently long resistance line, and combustion effort, high efficient and line and high long resistance time. Just 1 second, please. Consider a long high residence time and combustion effect afford high combustion efficiency. So what is going on here? It has considered long residence, means you have to keep it completely long residence line. You have to keep it inside the furnace to a considerably high, and combustion afford high combustion efficiency and residence line and combustion. So consequently long residence time of combustion, which affords high combustion efficiency, means time of combustion is requires sorry, considerable amount of place to for combustion, which is usable for high combustion efficiency itself, which can be 99% wide variety of fuels on the definite operating condition itself. So its efficiency of combustion is around 19%. Of course, all this capacity of combustion is utilized here. And excellent sulfur removal. When we know the sulfur and its residual gases are extremely detrimental in your health. When the coal burns inside the sulfur is oxidized primarily. When the coal burns the sulfur is oxidized primarily to sulfur dioxide. So the content of sulfur will be converted into a toxic gas, which is known as sulfur dioxide, S plus O2, SO2. Thus, 9600, when it is oxidized, it rejects. It's almost 10,000 kilojoule per kg. Per kg heat is being rejected here. So huge amount of heat is being generated there. But some amount of sulfur dioxide is also present. Some parts of sulfur dioxide compressed SO3, that is due to the presence of high amount of atmospheric oxygen. It is again converted to SO3. The SO2 and SO3 are equally difficult for the atmosphere, are thrown out to the atmosphere and undergoes chemical reaction and with moisture catalyzed by sunlight to form acid itself. So this SO2, SO3 first of all comes into contact with the atmospheric condition, atmospheric undergo thrown out to atmosphere. Next, where it undergoes chemical reaction with the moisture present in the atmosphere, it is catalyzed by sunlight to form acid itself. Catalyzed by sunlight to form acid itself. So this is by the effect of sunlight, due to the catalyzing effect of the sunlight, this sulfur is converted to certain acid, mostly sulfuric acid itself. These acids are perceived in the earth through rain as acid rain. This is little to accumulate life, trees, and destroy nutrients in all soil itself. But these acids are remains present in the atmosphere in as hydrochloric as sulfuric acid so, and in terms of rain, sometimes it comes down with rain, sometimes it is raining by itself, raining by itself. Both are extremely lethal to the life on trees and plants, and it can destroy the nutrients in soil itself. Now, the limestone CaCO3 and dolomite CaCO3 and MgCO3, these are the two treatable solvents used for the absorption of SO2 in the fluid-based combustion itself. So, the limestone density directly act into the CFB boilers as bed material. Uh, as bed material, there is calculation. The limestone directly fit into the CFB boiler as bed materials. Now, there is calculation when the time limestone is tempered into CO2 and CO2 through an endothermic reaction itself. So, we use limestone here and dolomite here, CaCO3, and these are here two principal solvents. So this is called solvent itself and used for absorption of heat, absorption of SO2. Here the solvents like the limestone or the dolomite, CaCO3 and MgCO3 plus CaCO3. These are kept in the fluid-based combustion, and for limestone directly fed into the CFB furnace or bed material. This is a calculation where when the limestone is decomposed into CO2 and in Ca limestone, when the limestone is decomposed into CaO and CO2 through an endothermic reaction itself. So limestone directly fed into the furnace and as bed material. So there is considerable there is a calculation when the limestone is decomposed into CO2 and Ca2 or CO2 through an endothermic reaction itself. Now, CaCO3 plus CaO is equal to CaO plus CO2. 180 minus is absorbs 180 kilojoule per kg CaCO3 per kg of CaCO3. So it absorbs a bit from the temperature, unlike sulfur dioxide, which due to its reaction it creates enormous heat, which is helpful to us. Now, the significantly oxidizing environment, the forces, circulated forces, porous circulated limestone reacts as CaO plus CO2 plus O2 plus half O2 means CaSO4 plus 15 kg, 15.14 kg, kilojoule, 15.14 kilojoule itself. CaSO4 retains the sulfur in the bed in the solid form rather than allow it to escape into as gaseous CO2, SO2. So CaSO4 contains the sulfur which keeps in the bed inside the furnace itself, and we rather stop allow it without allowing it to get as a escape as gaseous SO2 or SO3, and which will form acid like sulfuric acid, which will and there will be that limestone here, there will be acid rain here. The low LX emission. Just 1 second. The low NOx emission. NOx is the nitric oxide. During the low combustion temperature, owing to low combustion temperature and staged combustion process, NOx emission in a CFB boiler can be kept low. NOx emission in a CFB boiler can be kept low itself. The range 50 to 150 ppm itself. So, owing to low combustion temperature and staged aluminum process, and NOx emission in a CFB boiler can be kept low. NOx emission means nitric oxide emission in CFB boilers can be kept low because of the low combustion temperature staged combustion process, and this can be kept low in the range of say 50 to 150 parts per minute ppm. The figure by the side shows the combustion zone together with the entry point of primary and secondary air. Though entry point of the primary and secondary air. Primary fuel, what we have here, this is the primary air coming inside the cyclotron process itself. So primary air comes, the secondary air also comes here. The reducing zone and oxidizing zone, which goes through the cyclone, the flame from here, and combustion zone here. Reducing zone and combustion zone is here. So flame is circulating, comes here, and reacts and goes out to this rod itself. Now, the range of 150 to 100 ppm with this emission of this NOx emission is around 150 to 150 ppm. And whether the figure here shows the combustion zone together with the entry points of the primary and secondary air. It is the total combustion zone is oxidizing, it's reducing, and entry points are at the middle secondary air and at the bottom primary air itself. And through the distributor contents, now primary air feeding from and through the distributor contents contains 50 to 60% of stoichiometric reactant. Thus, fuel nitrogen, while released, does not find oxygen in the intermediate vicinity to produce oxide. This stage of low NOx formation is more effective than when the fuel containing high level of volatile organic carbon itself. The primary air feed system are formed below through which the distributor contains 50 to 60% of the stoichiometric requirement itself. Thus, the fuel of nitrogen, when released, does not find oxygen in the intermediate vicinity. Fuel nitrogen, which does not immediately when released does not find oxygen in the immediate vicinity to produce oxides. So the nitrogen which is released from the nitrogen is released don't get sufficient air to form nitric oxide there. Now, this strategy of low NOx system is more effective when the fuel contains a high level of volatile organic compound. Secondary air is added above the reducing zone. Since the fuel introduction fuel nitrogen already transferred into molecular nitrogen, there is limited opportunity for the function of NO2. Yes. This nitrogen in the combustion chamber is not normally oxidized to NO2 at the relatively low temperature of CFB combustion. So, after the sulfur dioxide production, we had the nitrogen production inside the furnace itself. So, what happened here? We give the low combustion temperature here, and here due to low temperature state combustion process and staged, means combustion is done in two different zones, not in the same zone. and can be thus either storm can be flow the range of 50 to 150 ppm inside the furnace itself. Now, together with the uh, figure shows the combustion zone, means here and here together with the entering point of primary secondary here. It is from here, it is from here, and primary air fuel air feed from below through the diametrical concept itself. Mm. Through the distributor contents, 50 to 60 is the stoichiometric requirement. Thus, the fuel contents, thus the thus the fuel nitrogen, when released, does not find oxygen in the intermediate vicinity to produce oxide itself. So here, nitrogen released due to burning, all right, but it doesn't find sufficient oxygen to make CO, NO3, etc. So it can, when this mesh in the immediate effect vicinity to produce oxide. This strategy of low NX formation is more effective than the fuel contains a high level when the fuel contains high level of organic compound. Secondary is added above the reducing zone since the fuel injection is already transferred into fuel nitrogen is already transferred to the molecular nitrogen. There is limited approximation of the function of NX2 below the furnace itself. For example, this is limited, this is already this is limited opportunity for the formation of NO2 above this zone. The nitrogen in the combustion layer is normally oxidized to NO2 in the relatively low temperature of the CFB-oxygen. So what we have in the fuel, we have organic compound that will call that with the reaction of air can confer different compounds of NO2, which is called NOx. What we do, but you have to throw it out from the furnace, but it is not like as sulfur dioxide is not enough space, it does not enough space to make the fuel itself. There is a limited, and thus that no fuel oxide is morally formed. Now, there is a limited opportunity fundamental about this zone. This zone in the combustion normally fully oxidized to NO2 in the relation low temperature of the CO2. Due to low temperature, it doesn't generally form the oxide accident. Then simpler flow handling. Let us go to the next point, simpler flow handling of feed system. Just 1 second. Now, simpler fuel area, simpler fuel handling and fuel food system. In contrast to the conventional pulverized coal fired boilers, CFB boilers receive solid fuels as fairly coarse sizes. Just 1 second, please. Now, In the contrast to the conventional pulverized cold fuel boiler, ship boiler receives cold solid fluids in fairly coarse stage. This from coarse stage means generally pulverized fuel boiler we have to break and make the coal up to a certain side, up to a certain side of the part of it, which takes an additional work and takes some more time. But in this steel boiler, solid fuels is primarily coarse fuels, means it is fairly coarse fuel, which is not may not be very big, will be separated, but don't have to do that or bother much with it. The finally cold fuel is simplify the ultimate upstream feed temperature preparation. But the most important advantage of that is the need of only one boiler and a few utility boiler feed points. Now, the upstream feed preparation is simplify the upstream feed preparation. This, as we can use any type of large different varieties of used oil for coal, and this receives solid parts, solid fuels in fairly coarse sites. This simply the upstream simplify the upstream food product preparation, but the most important advantage is the need of only one or few utility boiler feed points. Most advantages are need only one or only few industrial feed utility boiler feed point. The high degree of lateral solid mixes in turbulent zone in the bottom ensures fuel feed conversion, fuel feed distribution within the boiler air. Therefore, besides, the large height corrects any mass distribution research. Now, the small, so what is the meaning of this thing? What we got, see, like fuel handling and feed system. What we have here fuel is supposed not to make in small particles of small size, so that it can save the time of breaking the fuel itself. And instead of small, it can quite a big amount of fuel can be ejected by keeping it as it is. What happens here? So upstream preparation you have to make properly planned. But most important advantage is the need for only one feed point. Here you have to feed only one feed point for the pole itself. Here, if you utilize utility water is as a few feed points for utility boiler itself. The high degree of lateral solid mixes in turbulent stage at the bottom ensure uniform fuel distribution. So, so many high degree of lateral style mixing its carbonated part, basically carbonated part, the turbulent fuel at the bottom ensures uniform. Border uniform feed distribution within the bed. Besides, the large height connects any manual distribution itself. Next, let us go to small particle cross section. A high heat release node its high heat release rate at 5 per unit furnace cross section, say about 5 megawatt per millimeter square, is a major advantage of CFB boilers. It's certainly less than 4 areas. It has simply results in less floor area. You can make the height considerably, but it doesn't become very big floor area, so that while furnace doesn't have to occupy big space itself. Now, it reacts in beds and primary temperature. It results in less fire at high superficial velocity, means 4.7 meter per second with the intense gas solid fixing performs a high heat release and heat switch position in the bed itself. So what we read here, the cross section of the fuel and small furnace cross section, a high Heat amount of heat is released with later per unit pressure concentration is a pressure concentration is and about 3 meganewton per meter square. In a way, the different advantage of CFB boilers and the advantage of the CFB boilers becomes it requires less flow area, so boiler size is not very big itself, and high superficial velocity along with air or unless air acid gas proportion properly mixture to a heat release and then disposed in the field bed itself. Next, cold turn down and load following capabilities. Good turn down and load good following capabilities. The relative high fluidized boiler with gas velocity and the use of staged conversion permits a fairly good turn down ratio by simply reducing the approximate amount of fuel and that of air. The turn down ratio is 5:1. The high temperature fluidized gas velocity relative high fluidized gas velocity and the use of space conversion permits a fairly good turn-down ratio by simply reducing the proportionate amount of fuel and air. What we have here in the safety boilers is highly fluidized gas velocity and use of staged compression permits a turn down, fairly good turn down ratio by the approximate by simply reducing the proportionate amount of fuel and air itself. The turn-down ratio of 5:1 has been achieved 20% load itself. So what is exactly turn-down itself? High fluid is gas velocity. If the gas velocity is high and the use of staged conversion, not in a single stage, but a number of stages at a time, a fairly high turn-down ratio by simply reducing the proportionate amount of fuel and air itself. The turn-down ratio 5:1 has been achieved 20% load. CFB boiler respond quickly as the load change air. At the given load per unit can be achieved organized by changing the ratio for primary and secondary air and by controlling the side circulation in. So what is turn down ratio here? Turn down means say high fuel velocity stage conversion process would turn down ratio by simplicity simply reduces the proportional limit of fuel and air. So as the gas phase is quite high and the stage conversion prepares a fairly good breakdown or so, turn down so. So high this is high stage conversion permits a fairly good turn down ratio. High fluids and use of space conversion. Turn down ratio by simply reducing the proportional amount of fuel and air. So air fuel ratio if we reduce, since air is high, fuel is high, this turn down ratio is equal to 5:1. The five part area, one part fuel is and the ratio 5:1. This has been achieved. Achieve CFB will respond quickly to the load change itself. Given this high ratio, of fuel to air is to fuel, it can be achieved by quick response to the flow changes by giving mode and can be easily adjusted by changing the ratio of primary secondary air and also by controlling the solid circulation layer of the cell. High availability. The availability records of CFB boilers are highly impressive. It is almost 96%. So CFB boilers are most widely used here. Of the 96% boilers are used here. But what is the better advantages? CFB boilers are, however, erosion of reactor walls. The reactor others heaters quickly make finish the interface of the positive corrosion itself. Also, addition of water oil due to absorption of particles and difficulty to connecting interface due to possible consumption due to possible erosion for and density and campus complexity of the hydrodynamics. So what we have three so far: erosion of reactor walls get corroded, inflation, addition of particles. All the particles are present in the voice itself. Some of them have very toxic effect. Next, identity of next we are going to supercritical boiler itself. With the PC technology, this one-screw boiler, the one-screw boiler is the only tire suitable for supercritical pressure itself, because there is a not latent heat of super vaporization involved, and the water on being heated at constant assumed supercritical pressure sufficiently suddenly flashes into the vapor. There is no saturation point temperature as such. So what we have? The supercritical one-screw boiler is the only tire suitable for critical boiler. One screw means goes through totally. There is no number of stages less because there is no latent heat of vaporization. There it does not require to vaporize the coil. It's already the water is already vaporized. The water on being heated to constant assumed supercritical pressure suddenly passes into vapor. Due to this high supercritical pressure itself, the boiler itself suddenly flashes into the vapor, and there is no such satisfaction temperature as such, saturation temperature as such, and the vapor is further heated to the desired temperature in the superheater itself. Although there is no drum, that there is a transition section where the water is like takes flash. There is a likely flash before the transition. The water in the liquid phase, and after all, the water in the liquid phase, and before the transition, the water is the liquid phase, and after the transition, the water is the vapor phase. Although Vi is equal to V9 during featuring the velocity of the vapor is velocity of the gases during flashing. The heat transfer coefficient of water in the phase and after the transition water to the vapor phase is in the liquid phase and after the transition in the vapor phase. Although Vf is equal to Vg is during flashes, the heat transfer coefficient of air is in the liquid phase greater than that in the vapor phase itself. Okay, let us stop here.